Welcome to the Objective Arete podcast, episode number 4. I'm your host, Mike Lorario, and today we get to speak with Chuck Ritter. Chuck Ritter is a Green Beret Special Forces Sergeant Major, still on active duty as we record this, but soon to transition to civilian life. He's a combat veteran and a great friend of mine, and it's a pleasure and an honor to talk with him today. One of the things you're going to want to pay attention to in this discussion with Chuck is, and it doesn't matter if you're a Ted Lasso fan or a Walt Whitman fan, your life should be about being curious, not judgmental. And you should recognize that your personal example is the most important and powerful tool you have to influence other people. He's a great guy with a great story, so let's get to it. Here we go. Chuck Ritter. So Chuck, tell us a little bit about what it was like being a young Chuck Ritter growing up and being you.
Young Chuck Ritter. So a young Chuck...
a younger Chuck Ritter, because you're not old.
Ritter. I'm pretty old. That's okay. It's cool. So a younger Chuck Ritter. So now I'm at 26 years in the military. I'll be out at 27. And I've been successful. But I wasn't always successful. I was a little problem child growing up. I had a $70,000 credit card fraud charge on me from working at Radio Shack, a little scheme I came up with. I failed my first drug test in the military.
Can we dig into that a little bit?
I was a smart dumbass, let's put it that way. So my priorities weren't in the right place, but I had a photographic memory. I could, somebody came in, I'd memorized everything about their credit card information. I found a flaw in the inventory system where if I purchased a $3,000 item and immediately refunded it back to their account, it would take it off the inventory and it would go into Neverland. And they wouldn't get charged. So then I'd take that item, put it back by the dumpster, grab it, it accrued, and I'm getting caught. Anyway.
A criminal enterprise how old were you when you were doing this?
That was when I was 16 or 17. And the loss prevention guy that came
in case there's any young people out there, I don't want to leave them with the impression that it's okay to do shady stuff like this.
That was pretty dumb. That's a felony. Like, I very well could end up in jail for the rest of my, for a good portion of my life. So.
But did you get caught?
Yeah, I got caught.
Ultimately, you got caught, which is the lesson we want our young listeners to really take away from this, is that ultimately you get caught.
You decide to do dumb stuff, you're going to have to pay the price. So that's the accountability part, which, I didn't really fully embrace and appreciate till later in life. I think I've been decent about taking responsibility for my own actions.
No, I mean, I knew that story, and I know that you carry that as like a great lesson learned. But that wasn't the end of it, right? I mean, you did that, and then...
Yeah, I failed my first drug test for the military. I failed at a bowling class. I had a free ride in college. My mom was an instructor at college, so I had a free ride there, so I was pretty embarrassed. And then at some point, I was like, all right, I actually got to get my stuff together here. And I think the Army is the way where I'm at. I feel like I'm pretty smart. I did really poorly in school. So, and since I failed a drug test for the military previously, it was hard to get in. And then when I joined, I wasn't in very good shape. I still sucked. So I had a ridiculously low physical fitness test and basic training. They brief you during the 2-mile run that you can walk, but it's not recommended. I took that to heart, and I had like a 24-minute 2-mile, which is, I don't even know how you walk that slow. But I ended up passing basic training. My parents had a bet when after graduation they were transferred money, and I was like, what are you guys doing? Like, oh, your dad bet that you weren't, there's no way you were going to pass basic training, but I bet for you, I bet on you. And I was like,
that's true love. Only a mother's love to not bet against you.
Right, yeah. And I wrote an article about this recently, but luckily there was people in my unit, my very first unit, that invested in me. They took the time, even though I was a lost cause, and they shouldn't have invested in me. They did, and that really helped me to become a successful human being.
So, I mean, okay, spoiler alert, Charles P. Ritter is a very successful soldier. Sergeant Major, E9. Like, there's no E10 in the Army. There's no enlisted rank 10. There's pretty much the highest rank you can go. And yet, here you are, you're telling a story about these hoodlum things you did as a civilian, and then how pitiful you were as a young enlisted guy. What do you think people saw in you as a private that said, okay, here's this fat, well, you're kind of fat and chubby still, right? I mean, no, can I say that?
I don't know about that.
I mean, we don't have cameras running, so no one can challenge me on it. I will say that the first time my wife met you, she goes, "Who's that?" I'm like, "Why? Why, man, he looks pretty good." I'm like going, "Hey, wait, stop." No, you're in great shape, especially for a guy who's been blown up once and shot twice. What do you think they saw in you as a young, can I say stupid?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, young, stupid, enlisted soldier or private to invest in?
I don't think they saw anything in me. I think what they saw was that they were good leaders and that it was their job, regardless of what was in front of them, to invest in this thing that they were inheriting and put some time into it. I mean, at one point I had to take a PT test every week until I scored one. Because I thought, my first PT test in basic, I scored like a 93 or 94 points out of 300, which was horribly failed.
Not even
pass,
a third.
Right. But when I passed basic training, I had like a 210 or something like that. I was like, man, I'm like a stud. But when I show up to the unit, like, you can't be shown to an infantry unit like with that. What are you doing? Like, gross. And just making me study, like a lot of reading. It's kind of, I think that's where I really got into doctrine, is like, hey, you will understand this. Like, not just. I just have that chauffeur knowledge where you can kind of regurgitate some words.
Chauffeur knowledge. Yeah. I have not heard that before. But that sounds. No, I love the concept.
The story about it was like the scientist and his chauffeur, and he was going around the country giving these presentations, right? And it came to a point because the chauffeur doing the presentations. The chauffeur was like, "Well, I've been doing this for years. How about I stand up there and give the same thing? Because I can say it word for word." And he's like, "Yeah, I think that's a great idea." So the chauffeur got there dressed as him, and he dressed up as a chauffeur down to the audience. This presentation to a bunch of scientists, and one of the scientists stood up and was like, I'm kind of disappointed that you didn't think about this thing. Can you explain that? And the chauffeur is like, "Well, that's weird. I'm really disappointed that I come to this city where you guys are supposed to be really smart and you're asking such a basic question." He's like, "I'll tell you what, this is so basic, I'm going to let my chauffeur answer this question." So, the scientist who chose the chauffeur, answers the question, right? But I don't know if that's true or not. It's just a story, but it goes back to chauffeur knowledge is that, you can say the words, but you really don't know the substance behind it. So,
but you know enough to bring up the expert when you don't have the answer.
Even that, but the point is don't have the chauffeur knowledge. Right? You don't need the expert. Know what you're talking about, right? So, but that was ingrained that into me. Don't just have this base level superfluous knowledge. Actually, be able to know it and understand how to deconstruct these things that are in these doctrinal manuals, and that really helped me later in life. It sucked at the time in Hawaii. That was some very hard training, but I think it set me up for success later in life.
If you enjoy our podcast, then take a second to check out our new website and online journal at www.objectivearete.com. We publish articles there under the Arete Journal on topics that can help you dominate and conquer all obstacles in life. Also, sign up for our weekly newsletter. Check us out and give us some feedback on how we can positively impact the world at www.objectivearete.com. And back to the show.
But you're living in Hawaii.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Hawaii is pretty awesome. It is truly paradise. Okay, so how long were you in the infantry before you went Special Forces?
About 3 years.
And why did you decide to go Special Forces?
So I was now successful in the infantry. I was pretty decent, I thought. And this recruiter came, and we'd work with some guys coming out of the first Special Forces group. They'd flown in, and they were just blowing off all the doors.
Did you have a deployment as an infantry guy?
Just to Japan. No, there's no.
But not a combat deployment.
No, there's no combat going on at the time. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. The recruiters came and said, "This seems very interesting. It seems like a challenge." Talked to one of my buddies who I'm meeting with this week. He lives here now, and let's go to selection. We did, and we went to selection and barely passed. Got boarded. Probably shouldn't have passed selection, but made it. And went to the Special Force qualification course, came out on the backside, deployed a lot, took 4 bullets at different points in time, got blown up. But they have my next hip replacement on this coming Monday, so that should be interesting. I got my right hip replaced last year, so that'll be my 33rd surgery in the past, 2008. It's my 33rd surgery since 2008, and then, I'll be retiring here shortly after that.
Wow. You've got how many months in a combat zone?
That I don't know. I know it's over 4 years, which isn't, there's plenty of people that have way more time deployed than that.
How many overseas service bars do you got on your uniform?
I have to look. I don't know. I'm really bad.
You're
not a uniform guy.
I know, but your humility is killing me.
I know I've got 12 combat deployments. I can tell you that for a fact.
12 combat deployments, they average, minus getting blown up and sent home early.
Yeah, those ones
7 months, 9 months each.
Yeah, they're about 8 months each on average. The ones I decided to go home early. because it was.
You decided to go home early because you had a
I was
bullet,
like,
multiple
dangerous.
bullets
Get out
in
of
your.
here. This seems like the best way to do it.
Yeah, so we've talked about this before too. So I mean, I'm kind of jumping a little bit at fast forward too. So I was impersonating Patrick Swayze on this. That was my role. Like they brought me into like no, I'm just kidding.
Patrick Swayze.
Yeah. If I was, how tall is Patrick Swayze?
About the same size as you.
Is he? Okay, cool.
Like 4'8". Right?
Dude. So I met you in 2013 in Afghanistan. It was kind of cool because, we were on the cusp of the transition, putting the Afghans in the lead. And it was funny because I was with a bunch of people that were trying to do these, we can do this and we can do that. And it's very high and elevated. And you bring this Afghan major into a meeting who all
let's back up real quick. You guys, this conglomerate of people are like, hey, we need to do this. I'm like, this isn't going to work. Like, I get what you're trying to do, but it's not going to work. And nobody would listen. So then I was like, okay, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to bring this Afghan in. And then,
we're doing this big planning meeting on how we're going to help the Afghan Special Operations Command. And the Afghan major that you brought in, someone finally turns and goes, well, what can we do to help you? And he's like, I just want to learn how to read a map and use a compass, which is like a skill level 2 or 3 thing in our Army. I had to like going, okay, regardless of what your intentions are, they've got to be grounded in reality.
You got to meet people where they're at.
You got to meet people where they're at and help them get to where they want to go, not drag them to where you think or you used to be or where you are. It's kind of a cool thing.
Everybody kind of just went real quiet in the room. I'm like,
everybody went real quiet in the room.
This is what I've been trying to tell y'all. Does it make sense now?
Yeah, it makes huge sense. Yeah, it's interesting that, you and I left Afghanistan about the same time in 2013, except that I walked out on an airplane to meet my wife in Bermuda, and you went out on a stretcher because you'd gotten stitched up with a machine gun saving an Afghan commando in a firefight. As an aside, I think about this. When I was a battalion commander in Afghanistan, one of the places we went into was Tagab. They didn't want us go. When I say they didn't want us going in there, I mean my bosses didn't want us going in there because it was very quiet. And I reminded them that the neighborhoods that the mafia lives in New Jersey are very quiet also. And they're that way for a reason. Keep the cops out. Some very interesting things that we learned after we went in there, but we never got to go back in there again. And so 10 years later, I'm back in Afghanistan, and you go into Tagab and you get shot up like big time. It's kind of an interesting thing.
Hatchet Brewing Company. Hatchet Brewing Company provides the primary beer found in the Falcon Snail Pub, which is an Irish pub we built in my basement. It's pretty awesome. Hatchet is also owned by Greg Walker, CEO of Objective Arete, and a former Army Special Forces officer. If you find yourself in the Southern Pines, North Carolina area, stop by the tap room. Otherwise, check them out online at www.hatchetbrewingcompany.com. And back to the show.
So what do you think are some of the greatest lessons you learned out of being a team sergeant, working in Afghanistan, working around the world? You've done work in Africa, right? You've done work in all kinds of places.
I never went to Africa. Like, my language has been French the whole time I've been in group. We had to test them every year.
Wait, you've never went to Africa?
No, it was always to Southwest Asia, Middle Eastern places. So I wish I had. I recently wrote a long paper on Africa, with the topic being great powers competition and how.
And in that third group's area of.
It is. And people are back in Africa. I missed that boat. I was just always in.
Maybe we kept you out of Africa for a reason. Have you ever thought about that?
I don't think so. I think Africa would be cool. I could actually practice my language a little bit, I mean, I've worked with the French a couple of times. So I got to practice a little bit. But.
So across all your deployments, all your tours, what are some of the greatest insights that you walk away with?
One of the things I learned traveling the world is, one, out of all the countries I've been to, which have been amazing, I've really enjoyed all my experiences, but a great appreciation for the United States of America. I firmly believe that we're humans. We're all flawed. This country is by no means perfect, and it never will be. It wasn't founded on perfection. People always go back to the founding. I was like, oh, well, this is like, no, nobody's perfect back then, and nobody's perfect now. With all our flaws, this is still the greatest nation on the planet, in my opinion, and I will still fight for it and bleed for it and die for it any day of the week, just like I have in the past. I'm appreciative of it, and I enjoy it, and I think some people that always find themselves hating on their own country maybe need to go out and just enjoy what's out there. I just got back from Montana shooting an elk. I mean, this place is amazing.
Did the elk shoot back?
No, you get close enough to those things, they'll probably mess you up.
And where's the challenge in that? Like, if the elk's not shooting back, really, where's the challenge?
Well, I've had this concept. I was like, what if I go and hook up with the elk and sell them weapons, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's an incredibly important insight. I spent time before I came back to Fort Bragg to command a battalion. I spent time in Southeast Asia, in Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. And when I consider that time, with also the time in Afghanistan, and in Cambodia, in Laos, and in Vietnam, there are people living in dirt floor huts with no running water. That's poverty. When you sleep with your animals to protect them.
And for warmth.
That's poverty. You come back to the United States and poverty is a different level, right? I mean, like there are some people in America who are probably maybe close to being that poor, but most quote unquote poor people in America are not that poor. And I think if they could appreciate how better off they are.
Yeah, one of the things, like we're talking about animals, right? You go through those areas. I remember going through a village one time. I was like, why is there just poop everywhere? Like, are these people just not killing? No, it's here for a reason. I was like, what's the reason? Like, well, they let it dry. And he's like, look, when we walk past these walls in a minute, you're going to see it stuck on the walls. They dry it. This is how they heat their houses. This is how they cook.
Yeah.
Like, this is how they survive.
Right.
So it's not just because they're nasty. It's just if they don't do this, then they will not live. We don't have to do that.
Right.
In the infantry, they ingrain into you the 3 to 5 second rush. Right. When you decide to go above that, you go to 6 to 7 seconds. That's what happens.
So that 3 second, I'm up, I'm running, I'm down is important.
When you try to rely on your own innate genius and ability to reinvent the wheel, and you decided to go outside the box with things like that, that's
I'm
what
up,
happens.
I'm running, I'm down now because I've been shot.
I easily got another second. It will give you every time. So outside of that, outside of the 3 to 5 second rush, I came to the conclusion a long time ago that if you truly 100% believe in your own headspace that you are an unstoppable force of nature and that absolutely nothing is going to keep you down, and that's what you'll be, right? And people are like, oh yeah, how happens when a bus hits you? It's like, well, I can't control that, but I can control what I can control.
Yeah.
I can control my own actions and my own reactions. I can control my own emotions to a point, right? In between, stimulus and reaction, there's that space. That's what you can control. I can't control these other things, so I'm not going to worry about them as much as I can. But I can control what's up here, and I can control the way I view the world. And the way I view the world is that I'm a juggernaut. Once I get moving, there's nothing that's going to stop me. There's going to be things that are going to try, and there's going to be setbacks, and I'm going to need some ego checks here and there, because that sounds a little bit arrogant the way I'm explaining this, and maybe it is on that cusp of hubris, which we need to stay out of that wavelength. But I know in my mind that I have an objective, like with Objective Arete. Like, we've set out what we want to do, and there's no doubt in my mind we're going to achieve that, because what's going to stop me, right? And if anything that does decide to trip me up, I'm going to use that as a springboard, right? I say it all the time, a springboard to being legendary, a springboard to success. But every failure, every bit of adversity, it's in one of our tagline, right? Embrace adversity.
Yeah.
Right? Take it and use it, right? I think that every time I've been wounded, like the first time I got shot when you were going home, I took 3 PKM rounds, and all those surgeons said, hey, you're not going to be able to reuse your arm for almost a year. I died on the operating table. They gave me a ton of blood, like 13 inches of blood. In my mind, I was like, no, I'm going to go back. I had all the trainers, I had the sports psychs, I had the dietitian, I had everybody meet me at the hospital before my last surgery on my shoulder. And I was like, let's come with a game plan. I came with a game plan, had that last surgery. That next Monday or Tuesday, I'm in the gym with tubes sticking out of me, all the drainage tubes and stuff, and I'm working on getting back. And they told me, the boss was like, hey, you're not coming back. But I still redeployed within 2 months, and I finished out that combat training. But when I got there, they said, okay, you came back here. We don't want you back. You kind of snuck back in. We can't really kick you out because you're a testament to the program. But you're not going back on a combat mission. Still went back on a combat mission. Because it's just that mindset, like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm not going to do it just for me. To me, it was, I'm getting back in the game for me. That's what I convinced myself. Whether this is real or not, I convinced myself, like, I'm getting back in the game to prove this point that nothing in life can stop you. And I want to show that to other people. I want to show that to my team, and me not going back it's a disservice to them.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and you just mentioned your team, like your role. You were a team sergeant when that happened. They were still your team when you got wounded. I think that's one of the things I love about your story and your example.
Grunt Style is not only one of our sponsors, but one of their founders, Tim Jensen, is also on the Objective Arete Board of Advisors. Tim runs the Grunt Style Foundation, which is committed to helping veterans through issues post-military service to achieve greatness in life. They've worked closely with Congress on many bills concerning the Veterans Administration and access to proper medications and treatment. Check them out at www.gruntstylefoundation.org and support them if you have the means. They do a lot of great work and advocacy for military veterans. That's www.gruntstylefoundation.org.
So you get wounded in 2013. I come and visit you in the hospital at Bagram before you get medevac, and I don't see you again, but we stay in touch. And maybe I saw you back here in Pinehurst at some point in time. But then I'm in Durham, North Carolina in November of 2014 with my wife and another friend. I'm getting ready to go speak for a veterans group in Pennsylvania. And I get this text on my phone, and there's this picture. I couldn't tell who the picture was, except that I could tell that whoever they were, they had a bloodied, bandaged hand. And they're in kit, combat gear and kind of a beard, scruffy looking. But the text came from you, and I'm like going, Chuck, is this you in this picture? And like you said, yeah. And I'm like, well, where are you at? And I'm like, well, I'm in Germany about to get a second surgery. Took 2 PKM rounds in the hand. I'm like going, holy cow, what the hell? And like, so this is like not even a year and a half from when you were wounded pretty severely. I mean, like you said, on the table, coded out, bring you back, 13 units of blood. And a year and a half later, you're back in combat, getting wounded. Now, I think you were probably leading your team too at that time, but you're getting wounded a year and a half later. Like, what drove you to go back into combat that soon? I mean, did you have to go back into combat? Could you have taken a pass on any of that?
They were trying to stop me. One of our mutual friends, a guy named Mike Sullivan, our battalion commander at the time, one of the greatest battalion commanders ever.
Besides Michael Lorario?
Besides, yeah. He was actually told by the group, he got in trouble. The group commander was like, hey, you can't deploy Chuck. Like, he's not going to deploy again. And then he was like, whatever. Why would I leave that team starting on the bench, right? So I ended up deploying, and then obviously when I got shot, he was like, yeah, okay, Chuck got shot. So you're right. Because the guy's like, if Chuck deploys, he's out.
You're a bullet magnet. There's a high probability he's going to get shot.
And it's weird because I don't think that I'm this risky person, right? Like when I got shot in 2013, it's like the best bad decision we can make is this Afghan is wounded. The enemy is literally about to take him.
Yeah.
We have no air support. Like we have to fight out there. And the reality is we're going to get messed up getting this guy. Some of us are going to die.
But it would not be a good thing for them to get this guy.
This is the right thing to do regardless of the consequences.
Right.
I think that's one of the things in life that we should commit ourselves. Like whatever your values are and the virtues you're working on, you need to be dedicated to those and be willing to execute them regardless of the consequences.
Yeah, amen.
So same thing next year, get out of this helicopter. We already knew it was going to be a bad situation. We knew we were getting ourselves into. It was landing in the middle of the day in Russian helicopters in the middle of this firefight where the Afghans had been pinned all the way. We knew it was going to be bad, a little bit worse than we expected. Got out of the helicopter, and I was like, okay, well, we're definitely not where we thought we were going to be, or we were, but the Afghans weren't there, and the enemy was like right on top of us in multiple machine gun positions. Like the best bad decision we can make is to move into machine gun fire. To go on that mission, it's just like, okay, well, this is my job. This is what I volunteered to do. This is what I enjoy doing. I feel like I'm pretty good at it, and it would be a disservice to my detachment if I didn't go on this mission or continue what I was doing. It's not like this big patriotic thing like, oh, I'm here for America. And it's like, no, this is what we're doing. This is what we're dedicated to at this point in time, and we're going to see it through.
I mean, I've come to believe strongly that life is nothing but a collection of experience. And it's not the experiences that matter, it's the people that you experience them with. And I use that story of you getting shot in that LZ, that landing zone, going to rescue a bunch of Afghan commandos who'd been pinned down. I used that for years in a leadership academy that I was doing with one of my clients. And it was at some point where I was like, hey, Chuck's back. Why don't I bring you along to tell your story so they get it right? And because to me, the key lesson of that story, as I understood it, was, people are watching you all the time when you're in charge, when you're a quote unquote leader, when you're in a leadership position. And that's not the reason to do the right thing. It's just another reason to do the right thing. And as I understood your story, I took it as like, here you were doing the right thing because it was the right thing. There were people whose lives were on the line, but also because you needed to be the example. Your personal example was what was going to keep your guys in the fight, the Afghans in the fight. And so I thank you for what you did that day, but also the fact that it relates for the rest of us, an example of stick to your values, do the right thing because it matters, regardless of the consequence, and people are watching. I mean, that's how I see it.
Quantum Dagger. If you like future war, great stories, and military thought experiment type fiction, then check out the book Quantum Dagger. What makes this book special is that it was written by an active duty Army Special Operations officer named Tom Gaines. He wrote the book as a realistic thought experiment on what the next war could look like between peer competitors with current technology trends. It's about as real of a what if as you can get. You can find Quantum Dagger at Amazon.com, and I highly recommend it. And back to the show.
And maybe it motivates others to do the same thing, right? Don't give up. Don't just sideline something, right? And sometimes it comes to a point where people are like, hey, I can't do this, and that's perfectly fine. But also, if you have your mindset on something, that's what you want to do. Don't let anything stop you. I've got this hip surgery on Monday. My goal,
wait.
I'm not kidding. My goal is to run a marathon within 12 months.
A marathon. Why not a half marathon? Why not a 10K?
I was gonna do a half marathon, and people were piped up. They're like, well, you're Chuck Ritter. That sounds stupid. Like, why don't you just? That sounds like you're just. Like, you probably do that in 8 weeks after the thing. I'm like, probably not. Just go for a marathon.
Have you ever run a marathon before? I didn't know this. I thought you were going to do your first foray into running after hip surgery.
I run all the time now, but yeah, I can run a marathon. That's not going to be a fast marathon.
Pace is everything.
It's going to be like a 14-minute mile, something like that. I don't know.
So, again, because we have this personal relationship, so that's not a secret to anybody listening to us today. But again, another thing I appreciate about you is your approach to learning. Right? I mean, like, I am inspired and in awe of your approach to learning. Talk to us a little bit about that. How do you take on new subjects or an interest in things? What is it about you or how you approach learning?
I enjoy the reality of being ignorant about things. Like, okay, I'm ignorant on this topic, whatever it might be. Case in point, recently, I'm finishing up my bachelor's degree right now. Well, I saved all my math tests, or my math classes to the end, knowing that I was weak on math, and I haven't done math since I was in high school, and I sucked in. So I went and purchased a bunch of different books, everything from fourth grade math up to the end of Algebra 1. And I would sit there for 4 hours a day. I'd be here in the brief lab, in the quiet workplace, for sometimes more than 4 hours a day, just getting myself to where I thought I was ready to take. I had to take an ALEC exam to see where if I could take these tests. Getting to that point, and then just recently taking this. It was only a 100 series math course too. But it was a bunch of concepts I'd never been, statistics and sequential theory and stuff I just wasn't familiar with, and it crushed me. I had to spend 3 to 4 hours a day on it, but I really enjoyed feeling like I was barely going to pass every exam. And I think I got mostly 80s on them, and 1 was 7. And I enjoyed the fact that it just crushed my soul and it reminded me. I'm thinking, like, how have I been this ignorant my entire life and made it this far, right? Like, stuff like that. But it's enjoyable. I mean, the final exam, I got up. I was like, okay, I got to prep for this. I spent, I think, 3 to 4 hours just prepping for the exam, and then the exam was 3 hours, and I finished it with 2 minutes to spare, right? I think it's the one I got like a 78 on. And I was like, man, that was really difficult, but it was enjoyable. I enjoyed the fact that it reminded me of my own ignorance, and I got to work harder and study. And I like doing that with even what we're doing here with Objective Arete. I've been spending a lot of time recently looking into our model of the virtues. Like, okay, what do these mean? Like, let me look at these different sources of what they say it means, and then talking to Greg and figuring, okay, what does it mean to us, right? Let's have these conversations and figure out what it actually means. And it's interesting. Funny, like right now I'm reading Undaunted Courage, because I like, you got me turned on to Endurance, about the Shackleton expedition, about all these people that have far more courage than we could ever have, right? Like, that's some crazy stuff. And just learning about, like, okay, well, how do they do this stuff? Like, how do you have all this frontier knowledge and be able to do these things and look at the stars of these instruments and navigate off that and know where you are? It's crazy. And it's just cool to always dig into something new that you don't know about, and you can share that with other people.
So another one of my heroes is a guy who worked for me as a lieutenant when I was a company commander, and he had a 10 or 11 year break in service and then came back on active duty, currently teaching math at West Point. And he will tell you that, he doesn't really teach math. He teaches leadership. He teaches character. Math is just a vehicle. And, but listen to your story, and he would say, like, hey, are you ever going to use a differential equation on the battlefield? No, but you're going to have to solve problems on the battlefield. And that's what it's all about. And as you were talking about that, it just made me think of Rob Craig, this guy who's amazing. And your story, like, it's like, can you embrace the suck? Can you embrace the challenge? What are the lessons here to learn besides algebra or differential equations, right? To me, that's a great perspective to take on life.
One of the biggest things it taught me too recently was we were doing graph theory, right? And after I got done with the graph theory section, I remembered, what was it? It was Goodwill Hunting, right? Goodwill, they have the math problem on the board and they got to figure it. So once I did this 100, that's graph theory. That's like not even that difficult of an equation. Like, what are they talking about? Like, that's ridiculous. It's not the easiest equation by any means, but it's not like something I would think like some advanced MIT level, like math genius would, only he could solve, right? Like, if you put a little bit of work and brain power behind it, you could probably solve in a couple of hours, I'm sure. That's just brute force, like what they were doing with figuring out the different.
But it's interesting to me in part because you are so senior in rank, right? And yet here you are pressing yourself, challenging yourself to learn and grow. And one of the things I've seen on the outside, I think I've seen this in the Army too, right? And again, as people achieve higher rank and move up the scale, they feel like they know it all and they don't need to learn as much. And I see that in the civilian world too, and in business. There's people who feel like they get to a certain level, they know it all, they don't need to learn as much. And this is something I love about you and your story and your journey is you're certainly not there. You're at a point where you're still embracing the learning and embracing the challenge of all of that. And I think that's a huge example for anybody that wants to be a better human. Like, why would you be satisfied with being the way you were yesterday? Like, isn't a life really about being better every day?
Every day, right?
Every day.
People like to rest on their laurels. It becomes people stop being curious. Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay relevant, because interesting doesn't equal relevancy, right? Just because I did all those interesting things, I got shot. Like, okay, what's the relevancy now? Like, how am I making those experiences relevant now? Well, the only way to do that is to continually educate yourself and ensure that you know what you're talking about, so you can combine your experience with knowledge, right? And then, because training and education are different, and being able to apply what you've learned with an education pragmatically is also different. So what do you bring to the table?
Right, because the lesson learned from what you did in the military might be a lesson that is applicable on the outside in the civilian world, and it might not. Or it might be in some cases and not in others.
Because nobody cares what you did yesterday. It's what are you bringing to the table today? And
That's
all
right.
they should care about.
Yep.
Okay, what's in it for me now? What are you bringing to the table right now that I can take from this?
Yeah.
Besides a cool story.
Right. And I think that's so everything that we look at in life that's a lesson that we can carry forward with other people, it goes double for us, right? It's like, it's even more important for us to remember and to take on. So what are your objectives? What are you hoping to achieve besides Objective Arete? What's the future hold for Chuck Ritter? What are you up to?
Well, I'm about to obviously retire. I'm about to have my last couple surgeries. I got this hip replacement, and then I'll have
Okay, so let me stop you right there. Right. Okay, so how old are you? 47. And you're talking about having to look forward to your 30 what?
Well, this would be my 33rd surgery. Hopefully this hernia surgery that's after that is my last surgery for a while, so I'll be 34. I'll graduate in the spring for this bachelor's in strategic studies and defense analysis. And then I'm going to probably I will apply to Duke's MBA program and continue with Objective Arete. And it's an EMBA program, so I'll still be able to do this. And continue to learn, continue to try to inspire people and do great things, be a better human being.
Okay, I know Mike Krzyzewski is going to be listening to this podcast episode. Sir, if you can help Chuck Ritter get accepted to the Fuquay School of Business, make that happen. No, man, that's knocked down but never kept down. I mean, that's if I were to encapsulate the Chuck Ritter story.
Other people, I don't know, it's like a national pastime, or it feels like it's a national pastime with people just trying to bring me down for some reason. I was getting shot, or a couple of years ago, you're well aware, I was in a bunch of tabloids. I woke up one morning, I'm in like Daily Mail and all kinds of stuff for a bunch of nonsense for all that, right? Every time I turn around, somebody tries to bring me down, because people have different reasons, right? I always try to ensure that it ends well.
Yeah.
For everybody. Like, what are we going to take it? How are we going to turn this into a win? How do you take this really shit situation and turn it into a win? Not just for you, because sometimes that's easy. How do you turn it into a win for everybody?
Right. So we've talked about Stoicism and we've talked about Socrates, but That sounds rather like Nietzsche right there. That which doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Take everything and flip it, right? And things are gonna stress you out. They're gonna suck, but don't have this victim mentality where like, oh, it's okay. Well, we probably had some responsibility in some of it somewhere. What was that? For one, what can we take from it? What can we learn from it? And then, how can we change this? How can we flip this into something positive? It's always, and that's a game to me. It's like, okay, right. This is really crap. Sometimes you can't do that, like, you know, like in the morning when you overcook your eggs or something. It's like there's no coming back from it. It just pisses me off.
Okay, let me ask you this question, Mike. The standard question here: where were you when you wanted to quit, but you didn't? Physically, mentally, what was going on?
It goes back to Kunduz when I got shot in my hand in 2004. It was right off the bird. I was probably shot within the first 5 minutes of action off the helicopter. And as we moved to this berm, I took these rounds of the hand, which came in through the knuckle here and blew up most of the bones in my right hand. First time ever in combat, I had a double feat, which is where you have 2 rounds trying to go in the chamber. So this malfunction. So my weapon wasn't working. I was trying to shoot with my offhand. I'm trying to fix it. I'm bleeding into the chamber. Apache gunship support that was supposed to be on station was on the wrong HLZ. That's why they told us the HLZ was, our helicopter landing zone was clean, when it wasn't, because they were on the wrong helicopter landing zone. They weren't on my JTAG.
Sure, they were on the wrong one? Like, sounds like you guys were on the wrong one.
No, we were on the right one. I had planned the HLZ. I was like, this is the right one. Our controller, the Air Force controller, he didn't have comms with him. They had comms on my freak. He's freaking out. There's so many rounds coming in that then there's so much dust I can't see. And I remember for the first time ever, I remember like, man, my decisions here, planning this HLZ, advocating for this mission, we are all going to die because because we'd watched earlier in the day what the enemy had, and it was very significant. They had dismounted heavy machine guns. They'd held down 2 Afghan companies for a good part of a day already. I was like, okay, well, there's only 20 of us here on the ground with a bunch of Afghan, you know, we're about to perish. And my controller's freaking out. There's dust. It's super painful. I'm bleeding everywhere. I'm like, damn, this sucks. And then I was like, wait a minute, what am I thinking? I mean, like, no, we've trained for this exact scenario. We're okay. I remember I snapped out of it, and I was like, okay, it's not just me, it's this team. We are a bunch of juggernauts. And got to the JTAG, I was like, hey, check it out. I'm going to push the Apaches to your frequency. This is exactly what I need them to do. Called the commander, because you're this. So I was like, hey, look, you're down there. I'm up here. I'm going to use your initials. I'm about to drop a lot of ordnance. You're going to trust me. We're going to get this thing going. We didn't drop that much ordnance. And by the time we got there is when we dropped most of it. But just getting back in the game with my head and being able to calm, like, you know, the team guys were like, we got assault in here. It's like, hey, everybody calm down. I know that seems like being aggressive right now is the right choice, but our main objective, the number one priority is to link up with the Afghans that are on the ground, and they are behind us somewhere. And we don't know what we're getting into there. So we might just be moving away from more support. Wait till the AC-130 gets on station. Let's get some fires down, and then we can assault forward. You know, so that was pretty cool. Like having to hold people back. Got that. They did assault forward. We blew up a bunch of stuff, linked up with the Afghans, and then instead of medevacing me, we made the decision that, hey, I'm going to stay on the ground. We're going to assault through this village and control it, because if we don't do that, if we land birds here, they're just going to shoot them down. So that's what we did. And that was probably one of the few times in life where I'm like, man, I'm checked out. I'm done here.
Yeah. So how do you use that, the power of that, not quitting and the lessons learned there? How do you use that in your life now?
Just always remembering that, hey, this is what I've committed. I've committed myself to be an unstoppable force of nature. And I can't control this. I can't control if a truck hits me. I can't control if somebody comes up behind me with a bat. I can't control that. I can only control what I can control. And within that, I'm going to have that mindset but there's also the discipline that goes in with it. Like, if I'm going to do this thing, it can't be based on hope. It has to be based on that I'm going to have the discipline to do the things that achieve that objective. So it's like with Objective Arete, the objective is to achieve Arete, a state of excellence. In order to do that, that's intentionality. So understanding that sometimes we have intentionality and things don't go as planned, or we just make the wrong decisions. That is going to happen. But just be able to recover from that, being able to understand that as humans, we are fallible, and we're going to make a ton of mistakes. Understanding that every day as a human, like, I am wrong somewhere. And in order to understand where I'm wrong, I probably have to rely on somebody else to point it out to me, because my bias and ego is going to not allow me to see that. But being okay with that and being able to reroute when you hit those roadblocks, when you hit those failures, to use those as a springboard, and understand that no matter how bad it is, that if you believe that you're going to get up and dominate, then you will.
Be a juggernaut.
And if you don't, then you died trying. But what's the saying? It's better to die than be a coward.
Yeah, well, thank God we didn't have to test that theory with you in 2014 in Kunduz. Cool. Chuck, thanks so much. It's an honor and a pleasure to know you and to be a part of this journey. Thanks again for joining us in this conversation with Chuck Ritter. Please like and share this episode and subscribe to the podcast and the Objective Arete newsletter. You can follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, and X. Join us next time when our guest will be Joe McCormick. Until then, find your equilibrium and be the fulcrum.